The war was over, and the Autobots won. Cybertronians that had left the planet to avoid the war are returning to find that only a single city is left, and the rest of Cybertron has returned to a wild state. Welcome to Robots in Disguise Retrospective, a special limited series where we look back on the classic Transformers comic from 2012. Joining the TransMissions hosts to share their stories about the creation of the series are writer and now Editor-In-Chief of IDW Publishing, John Barber, and artist Andrew Griffith. While this podcast is great to listen to, we'd like to encourage you to watch the video on YouTube as well. John and Andrew shared drafts of scripts and early character models that we were able to show, in addition to the pages from the final comic that we display as well. If you have questions about Robots in Disguise, we'd love to include them on a future show. Please go to transmissionspodcast.com/feedback and send us a written or voice message.
Welcome to a special Transmissions podcast event where we are taking an in-depth look back at a golden age of Transformers comics, IDW Phase 2. So we have with us the creators of Transformers Robots in Disguise, and they're going to tell us about how the series came to be, and we're going to look back on the series itself and kind of get a behind the scenes of how this came together and how these beloved stories came to life. I think this is one of my favorite series from IDW, along with this and More Than Meets the Eye together. Those companion series, they really worked well together. And Robots in Disguise dealt with all the messiness on Cybertron, and it was really, I think, the first true post-war Transformers story, which I thought, this was very unique at the time. Like, we hadn't really gotten completely, Autobots and Decepticons at quote unquote peace, and how they deal with that. So I'm pleased to welcome the writer of Robots in Disguise, Mr. John Barber.
Hi, glad to be here.
And the artist, Mr. Andrew Griffith.
Hey guys.
And of course, I'll mention the entire team that worked on the book. We had the colorist, Josh Perez, who's an awesome guy. We've had him on Transmissions before, and we hope to have him back again. So maybe we'll get him back on this series as well at some point. Then the lettering for these issues, for the first 5 issues, was done by Sean Lee, and the editing was done by Carlos Guzman. So that was your team for Transformers Robots in Disguise. Of course, John Barber was had the overall editing for Transformers at the time when Phase 2 was starting up, and I think we'll get into how that came to be as well, because that wasn't the case at the beginning. So we'll find out what happened there. And now Mr. Barber is, of course, the editor-in-chief for IDW Comics. So and he's currently also working on Transformers versus the Terminator, which we are enjoying immensely. And looking forward to the next few issues of that as it comes along. Little thing called a pandemic kind of threw a wrench in the works. We didn't get to see all those issues, but we're looking forward to those coming down soon. All right, so John, I'm going to start with you. So can you take us back to 2011 and what was going on there, and what you were doing in Transformers at the time, and just in general? I mean, you were working in comics in general, and then how you came to get involved and run an ongoing for the next Transformers series.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess the story must have started in late 2010. Because I was looking at I didn't remember all this. So I was looking at the pitch, and it was from January of 2011. So we must have started before that, I guess. Sheesh. So at that point, I was writing like some of the movie tie-in comics. Actually, I was writing all the movie tie-in comics at that point. I was living in New York. I was I had been editor at Marvel, and I'd left, and then Andy Schmidt, who I knew from those days, had asked me to pitch on what turned into be Sector 7, which was one of the movie comics. And then when the next movie was coming out, which I think was the third one.
Yeah,
Dark of the Moon is
Dark of the Moon. That's right. In 2011. Yeah.
Okay. So I was working on there were like simultaneous series coming out, and one of them I got introduced to an artist named Andrew Griffith, who drew that one, and it was like that whole procedure was really pretty fascinating because I'd written, like my own comics. I got started, I'd like self-published comics. I'd written and even drawn comics before. But I, like actually sitting down and writing a 4-issue limited series, was still pretty new to me. And I was doing 3 of them at the same time, which meant I was making the same mistakes 3 times and learning the same lessons 3 times. Mm-hmm. It was really one of the things super fascinating about that part of it was like seeing all the different artists kind of coming in and how everybody would react differently to the story. Like Carlos Magno was doing the one that was set on Earth. Andrew was drawing the one that was set on Cybertron. They're both prequels, and then there was another one that was the movie adaptation. And I liked working with Carlos a lot. I thought he was pretty cool. I liked the stuff he did, but like Andrew had this part. There's this one scene, and I used to talk about it a lot when he talked about this stuff, where like Megatron was saying something like freedom, and he was saying it like he was disgusted. It was like movie Megatron design, but Andrew made it come through that he was disgusted when he said it in the drawing. I thought I'd have to like add some dialogue to it. And I was like, oh, this guy's really good. I think we. Mm-hmm. Can't remember like if we'd started talking on the phone by then or not, or if that came when we started working on RID. But Andy Schmidt invited me to pitch for an ongoing series, and then I think pretty early on, like you were involved in it, if I remember it. But sorry, I cut you off there, Andrew.
Okay. No, I was going to say I couldn't remember either if we had been talking on the phone about as we worked on Foundation. I couldn't remember if we were talking yet.
But
is that like you for the ongoing or?
Yeah, so in the ongoing, I remember like Andy asked me to pitch for an ongoing. The idea was that Chaos was the story that was going to end the previous ongoing that Mike Costa was writing, and James Roberts was coming in to write a couple issues leading up to it, and then co-write some of the stuff in Chaos. And then James was going to write one of the series. The original idea early on was that Mike was going to write another series, and then I was going to write the third series. James's was, I think basically what turned into More Than Meets the Eye. Mike was going to write an Optimus Prime series, and then I was writing what was going on Cybertron. Or that was pitching for it anyway. So that's where it started.
Is that the reason why Optimus Prime wasn't in the original storyline?
Yep. He was. Neither of us had Optimus Prime in the stories, so because he was accounted for elsewhere. And then when that wound up not happening, and I'm not 100% privy to how that went down. I mean, I was and remained friends with Mike and with Andy. So I don't think it wasn't like a big falling out or something. I think it just wound up not happening. So somebody had to have Optimus Prime had to be somewhere. Or else the entire pitch that I had was going to be everybody waiting for Optimus Prime to show up and solve everything, And that was actually something I learned from listening to Jeff Loeb, was him talking about like when they blew up Avengers Mansion and like Avengers Disassembled. He was like, you should put in like have the X-Men move in there, because if nobody's in there, like it's just looming. People are waiting for Avengers Mansion to come back, or like people are wondering what's going on there. But if you have it to be something else, they're not going to wonder about it. So that's where the Optimus Prime issues wound up getting inserted.
Well, that is a question. The Death of Optimus Prime one shot, was that something that came about to solve the question of like why he wasn't in the two ongoings, or first the ongoings came after.
You know, I was trying to figure that out.
Production-wise.
So I was going through the pitch, and I hadn't looked at it for a long time, and it mentioned a story called Schism, and we were talking about this earlier, and I think that was James. James had a like a pitch for what basically became Death of Optimus Prime, but I think I don't remember if it was always a one shot, if it was going to be a limited series, or if there's I just don't remember what that was. But it was kind of going to set set the table for what was going to happen, and I don't think it was fully detailed yet, because I don't think he didn't know what the other series were going to be. So that must have been going to set up whatever Optimus Prime was going to be doing. I think it was going to be Optimus Prime on Earth.
I remember some discussion at the time about Schism being like something was going to be called Schism, but at the time there was the X-Men story with Wolverine and Cyclops and Schism, so you guys didn't use that name. It was like the same time.
That makes sense.
I recall something about that.
Okay, I'll believe that. That makes a lot of sense.
I remember some discussion about that at the time, about that's why you guys didn't go with that name, at least.
Yeah. So and I think that's why Thundercracker wasn't in this either. Because I think he was still going to be on Earth and in Mike's series, because that was a big Mike character. What he was setting up with Thundercracker. Yeah.
He was just left there to watch bad soap opera.
Right. I think so. Yeah.
That's the time, man. Reality TV.
Yeah. Because there were a couple the Wreckers weren't in there, because even at that time there was the idea that Nick was going to do another Wreckers thing at some point. So I think in the original pitch I might have suggested it or something, and then
the
Andy.
Second pitch
Yeah.
that you sent us.
Okay. Yeah.
You had the Wreckers as Prowl's enforcers along with RC, and
She was a Wrecker.
in your original pitch. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That was in this? Oh, I didn't read the second draft again. I should have done that. I read the first.
So Andrew, where were you at this time? So you mentioned you had worked on some of the movie comics. Also, you were, I think this was your early days of getting into comics professionally, right? I mean, you hadn't been working in comics for a long time before this, right?
No, so the very first thing I did was they brought me in to help with was it the first movie or the second movie? The book. I'm sorry, I can't think of the name of it. How bad is that? Defiance. Yes. To help with Defiance, and then as that book went along on a tight schedule, I should remember the first book I worked on. I started doing more and more artwork on that. First, I started in just some inks and stuff, and then I did some fill-in pages and things. That book was on a super tight schedule and needed a lot of art help because of the timing and stuff. But and then at the same time, Denton Tipton at the time asked me to do covers for the Best of UK. So those were like my two first projects, and then things kind of slowed down for a while. And then all of a sudden, I got asked to help on Wreckers, inking some of Wreckers, because I guess Nick needed help with the inking and everything. Deadlines as always an issue. I'm trying to remember how it all worked out. Then, not long after that, I guess it was Andy Schmidt brought me in to work on Foundation with John. No, I know what it was. I hadn't done anything in a while for IDW, and I'd worked on some stuff for Hasbro, and I did this little mini comic that Simon Furman wrote that was supposed to be packed in with some toys, and it didn't end up being packed in with the toys. But I showed the pages to Andy, and he really liked them, and he was like, "Yeah, not everybody, can draw movie characters like that and make all the characters are distinct. You can tell who everybody is," and he liked the pages. So I think that's what led to me working on Foundation. And then that's when I first, met John and everything. We started that working relationship for a long time. And then, I was working on Foundation. That was ending. And funny enough, we just bought a house. We had just moved from California to Pennsylvania and bought a house. The very first weekend I was living in it, I sat down having lunch with my wife, and we were sitting there on a Saturday afternoon in our dining room, and I'm like, wait, Foundation's ending, so how am I going to pay my mortgage? And and then I swear, like not more than like 2 minutes later, Andy Schmidt called me on the phone, and he was like, "Hey, how you doing? How you doing?" You know, small talk for a while, and then he's like, "Oh, I thought I'd let you know we're going to start a second ongoing." I'm like, "Oh, that's great. Thanks for telling me." You know, I figured it was going to be like a movie book or something when he asked me if I'd draw it, and I was like, "Oh, cool. Yeah, yeah, sure, I'd be up for that." Then he said, "No, it's you know, the main G1 story and the main continuity." And I'm like, wow, okay, so that blew me away. So I remember at the time, I think he was still trying to figure out, like, I think he asked me like if I'd want to work with James or John, but he assumed I'd want to work with John because we worked well together in Foundation. Because at the time he didn't know who the other artist was going to be. He was still figuring that out. So it just seemed like the natural choice for me to work with John. And of course I just said yes right away. And that's how I
Awesome.
got working on the book.
Cool.
You blew
I
it.
remember it.
So,
I blew nothing.
So you had some very cool designs on the, you know, of the bots and cons and robots in disguise. And at the time there was the War for Cybertron video games. Before there was War for Cybertron Siege, there was the War for Cybertron video games on PlayStation and Xbox. And it looked like when the books came out, the designs looked like they were very similar to that. But then we got to see some of your previous sketches and alternate designs for Bumblebee in particular, and it looks like you went through a lot of different options for Bumblebee. And so, take us through the process of how you were redesigning the bots, and did it just come up that Hasbro was like, well, let's promote the new video game and let's try and, you know, harmonize the designs to that, or how did that process go?
Well, that was a lot of time spent trying to figure that out. So I got a call from that call from Andy. That would have been March 2011, and I remember it was going to be set on Cybertron. So that, you know, got me thinking, like, well, what design should I use? I still was like the new guy, so I'm like, am I going to be able to just create designs, and are they going to let me go with that and go wild? Because I had plenty of lead up time, because I think the scripts weren't going to start coming in till like in the summer. So I had a few months to work on designs and everything, but I didn't have an idea of which way they wanted me to go. So I'd ask Andy once in a while, like, what design should I use for this? Can I create new designs? And he kept just saying, you know, we're still trying to figure that out. So just, you know, bear with us, So eventually, like, I just started coming up with different designs, trying different things, talking to John through emails and things. And I tried a few different approaches. Like, we had just come out of the ongoing. We were just finishing up the ongoing that Don was drawing, and the characters were very mechanical looking, you know, very heavily detailed. And I was trying to see if maybe I should just like continue on with that, but like make Cybertronian designs, trying to use that same kind of style. So I tried some designs with that approach. I was mostly starting with like Bumblebee designs, because I figured once I'd nailed down what he was going to look like, that could kind of help set the aesthetic for the other characters. And then I think we were talking about this a little bit before we started here, but like I was looking at like really like futuristic concept cars, and they're very like round and bubbly, and at least the ones I was seeing at the time. So I was trying to think of what like futuristic looking like Cybertronian vehicles could look like. And but I did some of like, I think like Prowl and Bumblebee and stuff, but they were looking like very like bubbly and round. And John's feedback was very smart on that. He thought it would look better if they looked more technical, kind of like, especially Prowl. He wanted him to look really like tough and imposing. And so I went back and like did a few different Bumblebee designs, trying to like base it on like an original like G1 kind of proportions and everything. But then eventually Andy just said, Hasbro wants you to go with like the current video game designs and try to follow that aesthetic as much as possible. And by that time, the scripts were starting to come in, so I didn't really have time to do a bunch of designs anyway. So I just kind of like, wherever I could find a video game concept art design, or whatever I could find online for like what the characters were looking like in the video games, whatever reference I could find, that's pretty much what I used, and just hit the ground running. And then for the other characters, like I tried to fit that aesthetic as much as I could for characters that didn't have a video game design.
Yeah, and then you also got to go a little hog wild with all the nails, the unaligned Cybertronians. So you really got to flex your muscles there and come up with lots of cool and interesting designs. I think I think it's either the first or second issues where we get this big spread of just all these different Cybertronians of all shapes and sizes that are showing up on Cybertron, and it's really cool image there.
Yeah, that was basically like the establishing shot for the whole series, like introducing this whole new world. And maybe John can talk about it a little bit, but I was just rereading through these issues, and I don't know if it's like super clear that they were meant to, at least my understanding was, they were meant to have been Transformers that left Cybertron like millions of years ago before the war came up, started. So they had all sorts, they're supposed to have like all sorts of different forms that like you'd barely even recognize them as Cybertronians, because like they left before like Cybertronians had evolved to their current like human-looking forms. So I was trying to use like bestial kind of modes and like multiple heads and different numbers of limbs and things like that. But I don't know if maybe John could talk about that, about what the thought was behind the nails.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to. I'm looking at the script now. I'm trying to remember that now. Oh yeah, because they would have shown up. We would have had to have hit them first in Death of Optimus Prime, but yeah, okay, yeah. So okay. My thinking, at least at the time of recording the script, was that like as the war went on, like the like that really helped like lock you into certain designs that were functional in a war. But if like the Cybertronians had left the Cybertron or were in different kinds of places, wouldn't have had those same design necessities. Those wouldn't have been the most like tanks and guns and I don't know, cassette decks wouldn't be the most useful versions of alt modes or how they would build themselves. Because at this point I was still pretty new to Transformers, myself, right? Like when we were pulling all this together. I guess it wound up writing a bunch of it, but very quickly, prior to the ongoing. So I remember like really thinking at the time like there's something that kind of bothered me about a lot of like comic book science fiction where they would like take the least like when you're making a film, you sort of sometimes have to take the least interesting version of things because you only have so much budget. I think one of the examples I've thought of since I was a kid was the Masters of the Universe movie, with Dolph Lundgren, and it's got these like beautiful designs, of Eternia, where I think like Mobius did some of the designs. And, the stuff is really gorgeous, and it's on there for about 5 minutes, and then they're in suburban America. But it's like the movie didn't have a budget to sustain doing a whole movie set in a fantasy world, or you see that a lot. Like that's why you see these movies, or that's why Vulcans look exactly like humans but with pointy ears, right? But if you're writing a comic book or something, they could look like anything, but people still default to the normal thing, like why is there gravity in every spaceship in a movie? Because it would be insanely expensive to not have gravity, and to deal with everybody's hair floating and all that kind of stuff. So I was like, oh, maybe we can make stuff weirder, like we shouldn't default to Cybertron being Earth or being America in 1985. So I remember that being a thing that was really in my head at that point. So that was probably influencing me in like trying to make the nails weirder. At a certain point, though, there also is. We see ourselves reflected in those things more readily when they look like normal people, or look something like people. So like there's more than just lack of imagination that does it. And I kind of came to learn that the more I worked on Transformers, where some of those ideas might have been a little I don't know if like misguided, but like it wasn't as important. Like there's other stuff that was more important to making the Transformers work. But it's still saying all that is a gorgeous spread that Andrew drew, and it like really does set the tone for what we have. This is Mos Eisley. This is border towns everywhere.
Yeah.
Well, similarly, I remember too, now that I think about it, some of those designs were meant to be like, these Transformers have been off disguising themselves on other planets. So like they would have had alt modes that would look like an alien or an animal you'd see on a different planet. So that's why some of them look kind of like the one looks kind of like a mixture of like a centipede and a lizard, you know, and like it's supposed to be basically like,
Yeah.
instead of like a Predacon being a lion, like a robot lion, that's like a robot whatever thingamajiggy, whatever the alien would be called.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah. Yeah, and I think we'd see that much later on in the series with where you snuck in a Beast Wars character and Rat Trap later on, and you know, just saying he was an Autobot that was off on another planet where like rats were the dominant species, so that's why he had a rat alternate mode. So you know, yeah, that reasoning works pretty well.
Yeah, there's some threads
yeah.
you shouldn't pull on too hard.
Speaking of animal modes, I remember talking to John when we were going to start, we can get into this later, but when we were going to start using the Dinobots, and I'm like, should I redesign them? Like, should they turn into like tanks or something? Because there wouldn't be dinosaurs in Cybertron. I'm thinking about it like really like what it would like real world, like what it would be like. And John's like, dude, come on, they're robots that turn into dinosaurs. Why wouldn't they turn into dinosaurs? Because that's like the best thing ever. So just make them dinosaurs. I was like, you're right. Yeah. So I just kept Nick's designs basically. Yeah. Because it made sense. Because why would they change to slightly different dinosaur robots? But anyway.
Why mess with something that works?
Yeah.
Can't go wrong with robots turning into dinosaurs.
I think it's been tried in the past with like War Within and stuff, and I think everyone always just eventually comes back to the dinosaurs.
And so let's I mean, we can we're not going to go like with this podcast would quickly become 5 hours long if we went through each issue you know, page by page, but let's talk about the first basically the first trade paperback of Robots in Disguise. So that's 5 issues. And each issue is pretty much a self-contained story. Like they form a coherent whole, but I like that each issue tells a distinct story, and you know, at the end, and it's also told from a particular character's point of view. So we have these 5 issues, and just to summarize, before Robots in Disguise started, we had the Chaos event, which was you know, this major big thing with the Dead Universe trying to take over Cybertron, and Optimus Prime basically plunges the Matrix into Vector Sigma to stop the, you know, the was it Devoid, I think it was, from consuming the planet, and this basically reboots the entire planet, and so the Matrix is drained, but Cybertron is restarted, and so there's no more energy crisis because Energon has been reformed on Cybertron, but Cybertron is in a kind of primordial state where its life has returned, but it's all wild, and basically it's not the civilized Cybertron that you see in the Golden Age, where the cities have all been, you know, built up. It's now basically a wilderness. The planet is a complete wilderness, with the exception of Iacon, where all the Autobots and Decepticons were gathered, and Iacon is just basically a smoking rubble pit of you know, of wrecked spaceships and a giant satellite that crashed in the last event. So we're kind of starting at square one. Then we have the Death of Optimus Prime one shot, which sets up the kind of dual stories of Bumblebee and Rodimus. And Rodimus, of course, goes off with James Roberts into More Than Meets the Eye and off into the sunset. And John and Andrew stay here on the planet with Bumblebee to try and forge a peace with the Decepticons and with all these returning Cybertronians who fled the war a long time ago, but now are coming back in droves and actually outnumber both the Autobots and the Decepticons. So the Autobots are nominally in charge, but that grip on power is very tenuous because all the other Cybertronians see both the Autobots and the Decepticons as a threat to the peace and are not interested in following their orders, either of those groups' orders. So that's where we start off. The Autobots have, for the moment, pacified the Decepticons a little bit brutally by having them all fitted with these inhibitor, what is it, inhibitor deterrence chips, where if they get out of line, you can push a button and blow their heads off. So that keeps it. So the Decepticons have basically been pressed into being a kind of an underclass slash enforcement group, and of course that causes a lot of tension. So this is where we're thrust in with when Robots in Disguise starts, and Bumblebee's got his work cut out for him. It's not an easy thing. And then
One
with
more
the auto,
thing we should probably
yeah, go ahead.
point out too is that I was just going to point out too that at this point, Bumblebee and the rest of the Autobots on Cybertron saw the Lost Light take off and thought that it blew up as soon as it took
That's
off.
right. That's right. Yes.
So that's something that was part of the status quo. I even remember, back and forth about who gets which characters.
Worked, right?
Yeah, it actually kind of was like that. Like I remember I requested Blue Streak, and I requested Skylinks, and James wasn't using him, so I was like, cool, I can draw him in the background now and then. Things like that.
Yeah.
I was pictured there were some like rock paper scissors battles if to the side, like who got a particular one.
I
remember.
Good.
No, I was just going to get back to the Metal Hawk thing real quick. That was a thing in the beginning of this as well, because Nick Roach was drawing the Death of Optimus Prime, and he was redesigning some characters that hadn't shown up in a while or whatever. So like him and I had both had to redraw some characters. Like I redrew some character designs in this issue because I didn't realize he had already designed like Metal Hawk, and like he redrew Rat-Bat in that because I had already come up with the design for Rat-Bat in this series and things like that. So we were kind of working on. I guess I started this a little before More Than Meets the Eye started or something, because he was still working on Death of Optimus Prime. So we were kind of going back and forth a lot, sharing designs and things. But so once he had that really unique, like long, tall Metal Hawk design, I was like, yeah, that's cool. That's different. I'll run with that. But anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
I think Prowl might have been the only character that we really. I don't even know if it was that much of a disagreement, but I think that we both really wanted. I think he was definitely a favorite for both of us, and that he winds up playing a, fairly substantial role in both series.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Turns out he like Shockwave was behind almost
everything. Yeah.
Not exactly, but we'll get into that.
Prowl really used his head.
Oh.
So, but you did get nearly all the Decepticons, though. It doesn't look like at least initially James didn't. His ship was full of Autobots. Like I think the only major I say Decepticon, but of course in the series he's not. He clearly makes it clear he's not a Decepticon. Was Cyclonus, but the rest of the ship was mostly Autobots. So you got your pick of the Decepticons at least.
Yeah. And I mean, to be honest, I probably would have been more comfortable having a much smaller cast, because I always worry, and I think this happens in the series, that there's so many characters. It's easy to make it become about nobody, and I feel like I would have been more comfortable in those early days, like just coming up with a team of, 6 or 8 Transformers. Because I remember, actually, Andrew, you'd mentioned thinking it was going to be a movie tie-in comic. At one point, there was talk about doing an ongoing series set in the movie universe. So when you read some of those movie comics, like some of that stuff was meant to be setting up stuff that I was going to do in this ongoing series I was hoping to do afterwards, and that that Andy and I were talking about doing. So I think in the series that Carlos Magno drew, a bunch of characters like there's RC and Chromia and is it Alita that are the three motorcycles? Like they get blown up, but that was supposed to be a storyline, that what happens to them, why they weren't in the next movie. One of the things I wanted to do was have Starscream join the team, and it was really kind of putting together my little X-Men team. So there's part of me that would have been more comfortable doing something like that, and then winding up with like all the Decepticons is like, ooh, that's a lot of Decepticons. And there certainly is a lot of like fudging numbers in this of like how many Transformers would have to be in the city at any point. Like, we're not going to think about that exactly.
It's funny you mentioned the X-Men, because like certain characters in the series always felt like they had the equivalent of like an X-Men character to me. Like Prowl always felt like Cyclops, and like Wheeljack always felt like Beast. And I don't know, like I always had like a certain X-Men character in mind. Maybe because like I really grew up with X-Men, and like that was always like a huge book for me as an influence. Yeah. But I always tended to, I don't know why, like when I was drawing them and like body language and stuff, I kind of had like X-Men characters in mind for some reason. But like RC was kind of like Wolverine. Sometimes I draw her in like Wolverine kind of poses and things.
Oh, cool.
Makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, so for this first issue is we see the status quo of what's going on in Cybertron. the Autobots are in charge. Prowl is the enforcer. So Bumblebee's the leader, but Prowl basically gets everything done. He's deputized the Decepticons, so they're supposed to keep the peace. But for Decepticons, keeping the peace means basically beat up anybody who steps out of line, and that's not really a great style for interacting with civilians. I mean, current world events would kind of bear that out. Won't say more about that, but yeah. So, and of course, we're introduced to Horrible and Needle Nose, who are a couple of Decepticon thugs at this point, who kind of enjoy beating up on the nails, the pejorative that all the unaligned Cybertronians get. What is it? Non-aligned indigenous life forms. Is that? I think that's the NAIL acronym.
That was James. That's a Jamesism. I love that.
and yeah, so and we get a couple of incidents, and of course, Bumblebee sees tensions mounting, but he's still he knows he's got this power to activate these inhibitor chips, but he knows that's crossing a line. Unfortunately, he gets pushed towards the end of the issue. Of course, Metal Hawk doesn't make things easier by continuing to needle him and insinuate all the terrible things that he's doing that he hasn't really done. Which the Metal Hawk comes off as I don't know if he comes off more sinister than he ended up in the series. But was that your intention in this first issue when we get introduced to Metal Hawk?
Yeah, I wonder. I mean, you're seeing the issue through Bumblebee's eyes in general, but I do think when you go back and you kind of know Metal Hawk wasn't doing this stuff and he wasn't behind this stuff. Like what he's saying isn't actually unreasonable, Mm-hmm. It definitely comes off like that, but he's not. Ultimately he wasn't wrong. I think. Yeah. I mean, I do want to lead you down the path of thinking everybody's out to get everybody, or everybody's out to get Bumblebee, and you don't know who it's going to be. That was definitely a thing. But most, I do kind of feel like the same way with like Pyromagna later on, and like Optimus Prime. Like she was right, like she wasn't wrong about the stuff she was saying. Like Metal Hawk isn't that wrong. These guys destroyed their planet. Like he's got a pretty valid point of view. They destroyed his planet, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Short answer, yes.
I think part of that might be too is like I tended to draw him with like a smirky kind of expression on his face or an unhappy like expression. So he just kind of like always kind of looked like he was like, I don't know, might be up to something,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, we get to the end of issue 1, and this, I think these in particular with both More Than Meets the Eye and Robots in Disguise, we were getting this as a reader. I remember just getting the sense that you guys were not messing around. Like you guys weren't afraid to kill off characters pretty quickly, and in this issue, you end with kind of a bang, literally, where Bumblebee gets put like Horrible's. He's about to murder a civilian, and Bumblebee warns him. He warns him a couple of times, and then he says, "Okay, I have to do it." And Horrible is gone, and he stays gone for the entire IDW run. He never comes back. He's dead. He's dead, and that has ripple effects too. I mean, in this first issue, it's not it gains a much more significance several years down the line, but I mean, but this is it's a very interesting way to start this series off.
And if you look at the script,
Transformers differentiates from the X-Men.
But if you look at the script, you can see I was very much afraid about walking into my first issue and killing a character, because literally the first thing that script says is, spoiler alert, skip ahead if you don't want to know the ending. I blow off Horrible's head in this. And then I point out that originally he was a headmaster. And that suggests a tidy way to bring him back if we'd ever like to.
I remember that. It's funny, like,
True.
while we're still in this first
It's
issue,
an escape hatch.
while we're still in this first issue here, there were a couple things I wanted to mention or point out. Like, I remember when he introduced in the script, he introduced Hippo Tank, and I had to come up with a design for him. And I was thinking about if he could be a tank that would turn into like a hippopotamus and not have like a bipedal form. But John was like, yeah, no, I really think he should be more like a bipedal, like normal transformer. And I think that was for the best for his role as it went along. But that was something I definitely remember. I thought about making him.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I remember I was like, should he be like a hippopotamus that turns into a tank? Because I was thinking very literally about his name. And
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if you guys have time, like, it's funny, like, look at all these nails and think about where I was getting inspiration for these guys and stuff. I remember, like, in the big double page spread, you can kind of see, like,
with him, like, thinking that, coming up with the name. Oh,
no, go ahead. Yeah,
got a delay there. Sorry.
No, about Hippo Tank. Yeah, go ahead. Well, if you have any thoughts about Hippo Tank, I'm curious to hear.
I just remember that when Mike and was it Guido? I got a chance to come up with a character. They come up with an awesome drift racing samurai ninja Decepticon turned Autobot. I'm like, oh, if I have a chance to make a Transformer, it's going to be a hippo that's a tank.
Yeah, that was Shane's character. Yeah, Shane and Guido.
Shane, I'm sorry. I meant, Shane McCarthy. Yes, I'm sorry. Sorry, Shane.
I was going to say, on the double page spread, like in the background, you can kind of see like Cosmos. So that was actually supposed to be like, so all these were, all the buildings they were living in, all their structures were ships that they returned in. So my thought with that, and why I pointed it out to Josh and he colored it like Cosmos, was that's supposed to be like the UFO that his alt mode is based on. So like, that was my thinking for that. Like, that was supposed to be where he gets his alt mode from, like that model of ship or whatever. But so yeah, there's things like that all throughout. Probably too much time thinking about things like that. But
Yeah, and then of course, not only do you kill off Horrible, but we also get the twist that the Decepticons aren't as pacified as Bumblebee thinks. So not only, and that leads us into the second issue, because when we start off issue 2, the world and everything in it, we see Skywarp watching Horrible get murdered, and the Decepticons have already deactivated their inhibitor chips, so they could have let Horrible live, but that, of course, would ruin their deception. So they let him go, which is adds another layer to it. And of course, I was excited to see Ratbat back in charge. That's another. I mean, this is where we start to get the feeling that John Barber is very deep into the continuity of the IDW books, because he's pulling back with all the stuff from Megatron Origin, where Ratbat was a senator way back in the day, but he's fallen on hard times, where he became a cassette for Soundwave, because he was actually nobody really liked him because he was a manipulator, but now he's trying to reassert control, and then that quickly that plot thread is quickly yanked away as well. So you're setting them up and knocking them down pretty quickly.
Speaking of Ratbat, like, just for a little art info here or a little tidbit, but like, I remember coming up with Ratbat, it's like, well, what would he be like as a Cybertronian thing? And I never really quite actually like figured out what he would transform into, except for maybe some kind of like Cybertronian electronic device. But like, I remember his design was heavily influenced by EJ Sue had done this, like, I think it was like a CD player or a Discman or something for like the Asian series. That there's a sketch online that floats around that he did. And this Ratbat was very like heavily influenced by the look of that Ratbat. It was just certain things like the ears and things like that, and the way the face looks. But speaking of like the Decepticon machinations, I remember like you were saying about how with the ID chips they weren't as subdued as like you thought they were. So John like put in the script, if I recall correctly, that you'll see like Shockwave and Soundwave and every like those kind of characters standing in the background, not really doing anything, happy to just stay in the background, but like they actually have things that they're working on that end up playing out over the next 13, 15 issues or whatever. So it's kind of like those were very, very intentionally drawn in the background in certain panels.
Yeah,
So
I mean
cool.
and I think even Soundwave has like a little he has a little wound in his faceplate where his voice chip is disabled, so he's not even talking for like the first few issues of the series, and Shockwave is just kind of saying whatever, you guys do your thing. We're not really getting involved. But yeah, so the second issue we shift from Bumblebee, and I think this is the second issue is Starscream, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is now this is a reinvention of Starscream that I think was really inspired, and you mentioned in your notes how you took the idea of Starscream, where he's always trying to he's power hungry, he's trying to usurp Megatron. He when he gets in charge of the Decepticons, he kind of ruins things. But now in a post-war environment, maybe politician is right where Starscream needs to be, and this is the genesis of that.
Yeah, that was something that kind of it comes up between drafts 1 and 2 of the pitch, and I think it was like something that Andy really pushed was like, what if he's really good at this? What if Starscream turns out, he's not the incompetent, blowhard from the cartoon or something. He's actually, he can do the stuff, and he's all ambition and no ideology.
Mm-hmm.
It was like that was sort of how I started thinking about him. And remember at a certain point when he befriends Metal Hawk, Carlos Guzman was like, the scene where they're like sitting there talking, they really get along well. And he's like, yeah, Starscream likes him. He's like, well, is he still going to do what he's going to do? And I'm like, yeah, he's still going to do it. Like he likes Metal Hawk, but he wants to be in charge more than he likes Metal Hawk.
Yep.
Definition
of ruthless.
Scene where Bumblebee zaps Starscream with his cane, and that cane opens up. I know Josh isn't here, so we shouldn't say nice things about him, but the coloring in that, I mean, throughout this, like Josh's coloring is extraordinary, but like that panel, especially as that thing's opening up, it has that. I mean, you drew it really well, Andrew, but like just the lens flares. I mean, which a lot of times can look dumb, but they look so dramatic there and so cool, and so expertly placed.
Yeah, like yesterday or whatever it was that I was reading through these again, and I was looking at that, and I saw that panel, and I remember thinking to myself, like, man, I don't know who did these colors, but they should really get on this call, because I was really like having a whole new appreciation for his colors on this series.
Yeah, I remember just as a reader, as a reader, I just noticed how the colors just kind of made everything kind of seem more alive, with like the faction symbols and just various lights and stuff on all the bots just looked so bright, and I don't think we'd seen that in Transformers.
I mean, he makes it like Blade Runner, like, I mean, the atmosphere has a texture to it, all the stuff that, I mean, it takes, again, I mean, like the starting point is real good, like I love, I love everything Andrew drew, but like Josh really does a lot of work on this.
So speaking of his cane turning into that electrical prod weapon thing, as I remember it, like I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I remember it being Andy's idea to have the cane, because Bumblebee was wounded. He carried over his like old wound or something from a previous story, I think. And I remember thinking, well, if he could reconfigure his body, why wouldn't he have fixed his leg? And then I remember it coming up in a conversation, or maybe you had the idea that like he'd carry the cane because he'd be kind of like Yoda, where like you'd think he was just this hobbling old man, and then but there's a reason he carries it around, like or something. I remember there being a logic we worked out for why he had the cane and everything. And then maybe we should talk too about, like, I remember, so Iacon in general, and some of these pages here when they're on the streets remind me of, like, at least for me, the influences I had as far as like how the streets would be and like how many people you'd see on the streets. And I remember looking at a lot of like different shows like Deadwood or Rome or different shows where like there was like a developing town or like a frontier town. And I use that a lot for influences of like, like I said, like how big the crowds would be on the street. Once in a while, you'll see like a street vendor along a building and things like that. I remember things like that being an influence for me visually.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean this really does. I mean, despite the fact that Cybertron it's mostly wilderness, but yeah, it does get this feeling like we're in a western, or it does feel lived in. It feels like you made an effort to really make the world feel lived in and built up. So that I really appreciated that, and it's interesting. We've never had the situation where you have it where it's not like a war story. This is just lots of different bots trying to live together, and that makes it really interesting and really really different for a Transformers story. Yeah.
Well, that also influenced too why like you'll see certain nails pop up again, and certain ones you'll see once and never see again. But like I was thinking about, like, if you're in like a town like this, you might bump into a certain person like 3 times. And it's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I keep running into you. But then other people you'll see once and never see again. So that was like something I was trying to keep in mind too, as I decide, well, is this going to be a new nail or somebody you saw before? Things like that.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, Starscream makes a turn here. He decides, if there's going to be a path forward, the Decepticons have to actually gain some political power here, and not just be the permanent antagonist or permanent underclass. So he's going to step forward and try and if he works with the current leaders, maybe he can secure a place for himself and the Decepticons, but mainly himself, I think, is his focus. Of course, everyone knows Starscream, so Bumblebee doesn't even give him the chance to say anything and just attacks, because they don't think they never think Starscream is telling the truth, and that's his idea. Is like, maybe if I tell the truth, that's the way forward. And so he tries on honesty for this whole issue, and it works. It gets him where he wants to go. So he exposes the Decepticon plot to murder Bumblebee, and he gives Prowl the information he needs to stop it, and then he feeds false information back to the Decepticons about whether their plan succeeded. So of course, this is all Ratbat's scheme, and the other Soundwave and Shockwave are always off to the side. They're nominally helping out, but they're not really the main drivers for this scheme, and it seems like they don't even really care if the scheme succeeds or fails.
Yeah.
But Ratbat sees this as his way forward to putting himself and the Decepticons back on top. That doesn't happen, and we get the return of RC the murder bot to to come in and take Ratbat out. So and this was also like we had I think we had her like in the first issue, we had her in a shadowy background, and remember there was a month of speculation. Now, who's that bot in the background talking to Prowl? It's someone who has never been to Earth, because they mispronounce Earth, but we don't know who it is. And then here it's revealed that RC is now Prowl's shadow enforcer. And
I remember I remember listening to like reviews and podcasts and stuff at that time, and people were trying to figure that out. And I remember, like, because I had been careful, I didn't want to like cheat with it when you saw her silhouette. Like, I wanted to be sure that when you go back and look at it, yeah, okay, that's RC, but also have the shadows in a way where like it wasn't obvious that was her. So I was glad that people weren't 100% sure who it was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I mean, it was we knew RC was around in Chaos, because she was a not a I wouldn't say like a major player, but she was a bit player in Chaos with her and Hardhead as kind of a team at the time. And so yeah, after this, we didn't really know what had happened to her. But yeah, now she shows up as this enforcer with her twin swords, not quite lightsabers, but they look a little fiery. Where did you get the design for the or did she have those previously in previous incarnations, or did you come up with that, Andrew?
No, I'm pretty sure that came from Alex. The issues he drew of like her spotlight and things. I think she had let's call them laser swords.
Okay, yeah.
But she had like the flaming swords. But yeah, I believe that was kind of, I don't remember if it was in the script that she was using those or if that was something that I drew because Alex had drawn them.
Now, I'm pretty sure I definitely, I don't know. Yeah, actually, that's a good question. I always think of her with the swords, but I guess I don't remember where. Yeah.
Because I know it's in the script that she jumps down and cuts his wing off or whatever, or cuts and then stabs him. So it would have been in the script, I think.
Yeah, I guess you would have needed the swords. Yeah, those my two things that I think still work really well in that scene are that, like, I think by the time you get to that part in the story, after you've seen all the machinations with Prowl, after you've seen Bumblebee, with his cane, and then Prowl even stealing the cane idea but stabbing it into somebody to do the same thing. It feels like the story's over. It feels like you're just going to have Ratbat go back in there, and then to me, I think it's still surprising when you have this 3-page sequence of RC just killing him. I mean, I feel like you couldn't do that on a 20-page comic, and you could do that in a 22-page comic. And to me, like that's exactly the difference between those two.
I
remember that being surprising. What's that?
No, I was just saying. I remember that when I read the script, how surprising it was to see Ratbat being taken out when he was obviously being set up as the leader.
Yeah, and then I also, because I remember all the speculation too, and I know some people guessed RC, some people had it figured out, but I was glad it wasn't a mystery that played out over 9 issues. That was a 30-day mystery. 30 days after the mystery gets set up, it's resolved. It's RC.
And again, Ratbat, he doesn't come back. So this is a real death. This is the true death. He's murdered, and yeah, that's the end of Ratbat. We don't see Ratbat come back ever again in the rest of the IDW continuity. So I always got to tip my hat anytime you can kill off a character and they really stay dead. So
and Josh's colors in that. Josh's colors in that were so great too. Like they really brought it alive with the purples and the oranges, and it's kind of like a signature Josh color scheme. I find, like the purple and the oranges together, but it really works and sets a mood for that scene. Can I point out something too, like art wise here? Like, so the scene where Prowl and Skywarp are fighting inside of the communications tower thing. I remember those pages being very influenced by like things like Jason Bourne movies where the fighting's really like intimate and shot really close. So I was trying to keep those panels like really like trying to keep them like fast and tight and close and like just kind of brutal. And the part where like Prowl jams the sticks in, which also was a fun little thing that tied back to Bumblebee's stick, and then Prowl sees that and he's like, I got to talk to Wheeljack. Yeah. So he makes weapons of his own like that. And he jams them into Skywarp. Yeah. And I remember like, I can't remember right now, but there was some movie where like somebody like stabs somebody and they start pulling themselves in like close and they get really personal. I think it was in, I know what I was thinking of at the time was in the Fellowship of the Ring where like Aragorn like stabs the one Uruk-hai and the Uruk-hai starts like pulling him in close. I think I had that kind of like physicality in mind with like Prowl jamming it into Skywarp and then like kind of like keeping him close and then zapping him. So those are kind of some of the kind of things that like I'm thinking about when I'm like choreographing these things. So hopefully it worked.
I like that sequence a lot.
Yeah, that was definitely a really cool scene, and tying it back there to the Bumblebee scene at the beginning.
Yeah, the next issue, I don't know if we want to jump ahead to it, but this was a tough one to write for me. Like I remember at this point in my life, I had taken the job as being editor-in-chief, or not editor, being editor being an editor at IDW. We'd moved across the country from New York, and we were in my wife's parents were renting a beach house in San Clemente. This is back when you could interact with humans. I don't know if you remember those days. So we were at this beach house and had like a week, and I was trying to write the script because if I turned it in before I started my job, I got paid more. And so I was trying to get this one in. And like everybody else is just going out to the beach, and I'm sitting there at a counter on I guess on a laptop or something. Must have been my wife's laptop. I don't know what I was even working on. And the script just wasn't coming together. And I just remember like spending a whole day on it, and then just like everybody coming back, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna sit there and think about it. I'm like, it was garbage. Nothing was good. And I remember like sitting there on my phone, like just writing 1 through 22, and then writing, okay, here's what happens on these pages, and then starting over again the next day. And I think I did that a couple times.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, the end product came together really well. At least this was one of my favorite issues of these first 5, where it's Wheeljack basically. It's kind of not exactly, but kind of like CSI, where it's like Wheeljack basically has to solve this natural disaster problem, and he figures it out, but also the way he figures it out is by interacting with Starscream. So there's a bit of an interesting relationship formed between Wheeljack and Starscream. I mean, this is Starscream starting to form different relationships with the Autobots, where you'd think none of the Autobots would be warmed up to Starscream, but he slowly starts to gain some influence, and I think it's and Wheeljack becomes even almost an advocate for Decepticon rights a little bit. So it's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And of course we
funny too, John.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I think there's a little delay there. John was talking about like back when you could interact with other people. I was looking through the issue as we talk, and like in these first couple of scenes, people are definitely not social distancing.
Yeah, I mean the other thing is you have the investigation of Ratbat's death and suicide. Okay. I don't know how flying rat with no hands stabs himself in the chest and then pins himself to a wall with an energy sword, but
yeah,
okay.
There's a line I've always wanted to use of like somebody a cop or somebody being like, yeah, it was a suicide. He shot himself twice in the back of the head.
One thing that always amazes me about working on these books is one of the reasons like I thought about doing something like this was like, so this barrel roll is in this book for 3 pages and then dies. And like I still get people requesting like commissions of barrel roll, like a full page kind of full color kind of commission, and they'll be like, well, they're like, this character, like I fell in love with that character in like a few pages and just want to see them happy or want to see what they would be doing now if they didn't die and things like that. So it's just, the fans are amazing how invested they are in these characters in even just a few pages.
Well, I have a series going with different artists. I get them to do Scrounge.
Oh yeah,
it was like in maybe 2 pages in the original Marvel run.
Yeah.
Well, it's amazing how for sure. Yeah.
Well, also, I mean, I don't know if either of you guys play video games, but of course, barrel roll has become a meme on the internet from the old Star Fox game on the N64. So one of the characters says, "Do a barrel roll" when you're playing the game.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
And that, so in my head I can see like that the character from Star Fox, peppy hair. He's a giant anthropomorphic rabbit saying, "Do a barrel roll," and then a picture of Andrew drawing barrel roll.
No, no, I actually remember that game. I haven't seen that meme or whatever, but like I remember playing that game on the 64, and I remember that line.
Yeah. But yeah, so one of the aerial bots, the red shirt aerial bot gets killed in one of these natural disasters, and of course that pisses off the other real aerial bots. I'll say. Yeah, but also, and the going back to what you said about getting 3 pages and then becoming iconic, he also forges a little relationship with Dirge. So Dirge sees a bit of humanity, for lack of a better word, in an Autobot, which is his sworn enemy. So, but then he's quickly murdered. So that of course gives Dirge a little bit of the feel. So that sets him up on an interesting path. While Wheeljack is trying to solve the mystery of what these natural disasters are. He does solve the problem, but of course, that's not good enough. It's too late for barrel roll, and too late for a bunch of other extras that get killed off. So the aerial bots are they're done with the Autobots, and they're done with Iacon. So they actually leave for parts unknown, which comes back much later. Of course, this is before the aerial bots had become combiners, and that would be a plot point much later on. But John, what was your thinking in using the aerial bots here and making them kind of so disillusioned with the Autobots?
That's a good question. I think part of it, they do come back not too long later, because that is who Ironhide and the Dinobots go off to find. Mm-hmm. So I think it was, part of it was just mechanical needing to get the combiners out of there, so we could have these sort of naturally occurring combiners coming in for the end of the story. There's always, there's something about the, when I was a kid, the first, Decepticons fly, Autobots roll, and then the aerial bots, then this is still funny with me that I still think of like Dirge and Thrust and the aerial bots as being the new guys, because I was so into the Transformers that those first couple of years that it's all evened out now. There's maybe 18 months between the beginning of Transformers and them coming out, or I don't know what it was, but it wasn't long. But that there's still a separation from the rest of the Autobots in my head. So I guess that must have been it. I can't remember if there had been much of a setup of the aerial bots having that sort of attitude already. There definitely could be something, whereas you're picking that up from something that that Simon or somebody had written. I was looking through it. There's some parts in there that's definitely some of Wheeljack's guilt was based on the panel where I guess he kicks Dirge, and that doesn't seem like a Wheeljack thing to do, but bringing that in there, that becomes the thing that helps drive his guilt. Maybe there's something like that with the aerial bots, but honestly, I can't remember at this point.
Yeah.
Well, along that note, what was the inspiration for making Dirge such a central character?
I think I think that was because he was the guy that got stuck on Cybertron when it was overrun by the Insecticons, and I think he was the one that was left over. That I don't even remember if we saw. I can't remember if we saw that he survived or we just didn't see him die. I don't know if anybody else remembers. But
yeah, and you mentioned in the book, because I guess in All Hail Megatron, Deluge was definitely killed on panel, but Dirge, I guess his fate was unknown.
Okay,
so
yeah,
you brought him forward. I don't think we saw him anywhere else before this, but yeah, I think he was left over.
But he was just the perfect one that had been totally. He'd been totally betrayed by everybody, or like nobody was on his side. The Decepticons just left him there, he. I think they just made him a good character for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's funny, like speaking of what I was talking about earlier with like certain nails would show up now and then, like on the third page of this issue, the first, second, third, fourth panel, I guess, George is walking by a big like leg from a what's it called, landing gear or whatever from a big spaceship, and like in the background you can see this little two-headed green nail, and I'd completely forgotten about this guy, but like as I've been looking through this as we talk, like he'll show up now and again, like he's in the very background of that big double page spread, and I had completely forgotten about that guy, but like so I just saw him again. I'm like, that's a good example of what I was talking about, like certain characters I'd reuse now and then. He probably dies in the explosion, both heads. So
Well, this does bring up something, Andrew. We asked some of our friends if they had some questions, and Mikey from Moonbase 2 asked kind of what your approach was for designing these varied background characters who were everywhere.
well, like part of it was just trying to like come up with something as different as possible from what we're used to seeing. So like they'd have very like, I don't know, rounded heads, and like I think the best example is like if you look at like that double page spread in the first issue, I just like a lot of them I just design on the fly. So whatever kind of like I feel like drawing, like if it's something animalistic or something more, some of them kind of look like these tough like tank kind of guys, you know, and trying to get back to that real quick because I'm sure there are a few in there that would stand out. Like I remember there's one I drew as like a little he kind of has like a Boba Fett face, and it wasn't. I was kind of surprised. I guess I shouldn't be too surprised, but when the colors came back, Josh actually colored him like Boba Fett, and there's two guys over to the right. I remember like one was kind of inspired by like an R2D2 kind of shape, but with tentacles, and then the guy kind of hugging him, walking with him was kind of like, I don't know. I kind of had like Ironhide in mind, but like if he wasn't turning into like a van, but instead some kind of alien thing. So it's coming from all over the place. There's a couple of guys in that spread too that like they kind of look really like thick or they don't have a head. And I remember like old Robotech designs from like this weird like time in the early 80s when DC Comics had a Robotech license, I guess. And like they had some really unusual designs in that book that kind of inspired me. There's a guy over on the left, like that has like all these horns sticking out of his head. He was kind of inspired by having like a kind of like a Galvatron kind of a helmet, but like not quite. And then yeah, it was a mix. I don't remember if it was in a script or a discussion we had, but someone was saying like maybe like they'd have a different amount of limbs or have multiple heads or so I was trying to like come up with different ideas like that and like just kind of think outside the box. And I remember there's like three triplets that was thinking kind of like they'd be kind of like, you know, like instead of like the three Seekers, they'd be another set of three Transformers that kind of share the same mold and look. And then it's too bad Josh isn't on the call because I know he took inspiration from all over the place for the colors, and a lot of these guys are homages or like inspired by different characters throughout fiction that he's into. So it's like
there's one. I see a Boba Fett.
Yeah, that was like he was kind of like a short, stumpy Boba Fett kind of character, and yeah, I was just having fun. Like the one in the foreground, like the lizardy kind of centipede one, that was supposed to be the beast mode of it. And I always thought it'd be interesting to see what it would look like in robot mode, but I never got around to it. So it's like, I don't know, the inspiration came from all over the place. A lot of time it was just like what I was drawing on the fly. And if I felt like I should draw somebody we haven't seen before, it's just kind of like drawing, it's having the freedom to just draw what I felt like. I know like when Hippo Tank's coming down the ramp when he first gets off his ship, there's a nail in the background there that's really inspired by a probe droid from Star Wars. And then the other character, and Josh colored him like this, I think because I told him, but he was inspired by one of the like the toy-based characters we used for the for some of the movie comics. And I can't remember which one specifically, but he colored him. I think it was, I can't remember what it was like. Can't remember what character it was, but like the color scheme and everything was kind of inspired by that character too. But so it really came from all over the place.
Yeah, so so this was issue 3, Stick Together. I don't think I said the title, but that was the issue. One thing, before we just move on to the next issue, when you had the problem that Wheeljack had to solve with the lack of another moon, and having to basically channel this energy going into the moon. I wanted to know if at this time had you already worked out with James Roberts about his, because James Roberts had talked when he revealed in More Than Meets the Eye all this stuff about how the planet does these pulse waves, and that's how sparks are generated, and that was coming from Vector Sigma, and this when that was revealed like many months down the line, and they talked about how they had found the second moon and all that stuff. It seemed to tie directly back into this issue because it seemed like it was talking about basically the same phenomenon. And I just wondered if you had already worked that out, or if it just was a happy coincidence that those two things lined up.
We definitely had worked out the missing moon part of it. That was a whole thing, that we had going. Honestly, I think the origin of the moon, the energy going to the moon might have just come from the moon getting drawn glowing, at least in a cover or something. Because that might have been as far as was colored by this point. But realizing oh, that doesn't exactly make sense, unless there's something going on. I don't think the pulse waves were in my head at that point, but I think I probably ran this past James, and he might have given it that actually totally works with this. And we definitely weren't doing this stuff without each other knowing about it. I'm pretty sure we weren't. So yeah, a little bit of good luck, and then a little bit of us knowing what each other were doing.
A little energon and a lot of luck.
I almost said that, but it's funny. If you don't mind me interjecting a little art stuff now and then, actually there's a page in this issue that's probably my favorite page of this whole run. At least the first 5 issues, is the one in Wheeljack's lab. Because I had so much fun with that, because I wanted it to look like a cluttered. It's just part of his character, to have a cluttered, crazy lab. So I just went crazy, drawing pretty much every item that he ever invented or utilized in the original G1 series you can find hidden in there, and even a little toy of his alt mode. And one thing I think turned out to be kind of prophetic was in the first panel on the top on a screen, you can see the time machine from what was the name of that episode, when they go back in time with the aerobots and everything, I think it was. And so it's kind of funny that it's kind of funny that later on, in the series, John started doing some of the time travel stuff. But anyway, that was just a page that if anybody wants to ever take. If anybody ever wants to take the time and look around, you can find all sorts of little Easter eggs in that one page.
Yeah, I see Wheeljack's alt mode there. That's cool. And is that the that meteorite that they from G1 that
Yeah, there's little energon sticks, whatever, those glowing yellow tube things that in the very first time you see Wheeljack and Bumblebee in the first episode. There's that little I forget what the device was, but there's that little thing with the handle on the top and the projector looking thing on the front. That was from a certain episode. But yeah, there's all sorts of things in there, especially if you see it without the words over it and everything, without the letters over it. But yeah, that was a lot of fun to work on that page. Probably put too much time into it, probably slowed down the book, but
well, we appreciate it now. It's forever immortalized, so that time is well spent. All right, issue 4, Divisive, and this is another. We're 4 issues in, and we're already having major turning points here. So, of course, as readers, a major thing happens that we're not really aware of in this issue, but of course we realize it way down the line. But this is Prowl's point of view for most of the issue. and Prowl is this is how he sees things, and we get the sense that his hard edge is almost a little bit of a persona he's putting on just because he feels like he's been hurt so many times before. You build up this defense mechanism, and he's now he doesn't trust anyone anymore, and he just he only trusts himself. And this is where we have the Decepticons are doing other weird things that we're not really sure. That now that Ratbat's been taken care of, but now Bombshell's becoming a problem. And of course, anyone who is familiar with G1 will know that Bombshell has his particular special talent of Cerebro shells, which are known for mind controlling other Transformers, and he uses them to good effect here throughout this issue. We get a few more. And again, this was where we were getting John. You were getting the reputation of being the Grim Reaper here, because in this issue in particular, it's of course the last 3 issues we've had a couple deaths, but of course not like a lot of the character deaths are extras or nails or bit players. Yeah. Here you kill some major people, or okay, this time I can't give you credit because this is killing them, not they're not dead forever. This is these guys are definitely they're killed, but they're not killed. But at the time this looked pretty bad, because you kill Bombshell and all the Constructicons and we're like, what is going on?
Storm's really dead though.
Oh yeah, that's right. Sunstorm is dead forever. He doesn't come back.
Well, yeah, no, this is definitely one where until you know what's going on, it's maybe a little overly brutal. So, I can see that. Yeah, I am really one of the things that I'd always very laid out in here was that you have Prowl's narration going on until the moment he's not in control of his body anymore. Then the narration drops out. I kind of thought I thought somebody would notice that, and I'm sure somebody did, but it didn't become widely known. But the other thing was that he's going through one of the, I think, genesis of this is that short of Soundwave, Prowl was probably the most inconsistently written character in the IDW universe. People had radically different versions of what Prowl was all about, sometimes going on at almost the same time. So I was kind of trying to figure out what he was and where, he's my favorite Transformer. He was the first Transformer I had. Yeah, he was and I like the idea of him being, I don't agree with what he does in all the comics. I don't mean to say it that way, but I always I found him an interesting character to write. But the thing that's going on in his head is when he's talking about how Spike Witwicky change the way he thinks of things, and then whenever he feels doubt, and then he's aiming his gun at Bombshell, and he pulls the trigger, but he doesn't actually pull the trigger. Bombshell's the one who pulls the trigger. By the time the trigger gets pulled, Bombshell has taken over Prowl's mind. The last thing Prowl thinks is, I think about Spike Witwicky, and Prowl wouldn't have pulled the trigger. Whenever he has doubt, Prowl would have thought about Spike Witwicky and what Spike did to the Constructicons and he killed him in cold blood, and Prowl wouldn't have done that. So it has a double meaning that you're reading it, you think that he thinks the opposite of what Spike did, but that isn't what he's trying to say. And hopefully that kind of comes through if you read it, a second time, and what happens at the end of the story, and that Prowl is no longer in control of his actions for the last 5 pages of the issue. That's that issue for me.
Yeah,
it's funny there. If you don't mind, there are a few things in the art I wouldn't mind pointing out. Did you guys ever notice Rung's ships? Everybody,
the model ships he used to collect.
Yeah. So basically, you know, this is all taking place in like the lower levels. And like, that's another thing too, is like looking back, I was trying to remember like, well, if the whole planet was reset, why does it have this like huge like underground trash area and like basement kind of lower levels? And then I think at the time I kind of rationalized it as like the planet got reset and taken back to this like primordial state, but like not necessarily what was underneath. That's kind of I think what I was kind of thinking at the time. But like if on the big page where like you see I guess Blur getting caught by the Constructicons and Bombshell, you can see in amongst the trash, like I always drew little things, and you can see some of Rung's model ships down at their feet there at the bottom of the page.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, because he lost all his ships. When getting on the Lost Light when it launched, he wasn't able to.
Yeah, I think that's where I got that inspiration from. Like it would have eventually made its way down through like the sewer system or whatever and got down there. But like speaking of Josh's colors too, like I always kind of want to apologize and for the scenes where they're in the like dense like techno jungle kind of thing, because like I drew too many individual blades of grass and ferns and things, and like he just handled it superbly. And I don't know how many hours it must have taken him to like flat out those sections and those colors. Another thing I wanted to point out, did you guys notice the Rock Lords? There's a panel where Blur's speeding through town and like everyone he passes, they're pretty much the Rock Lords from the GoBots. And Josh colored him that way even.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of things like that like I don't know, like I don't know if anyone like I believe that was discussed at the time, but like certain things that like I remember too, like there was a panel that was really challenging when Prowl's pointing at the little miniature bombshell in Dirge's neck. I remember how challenging that was because like that little the bombshell device was so tiny and Prowl's so big that like I remember that being a bit of a challenge to get the proportions right for that. But like yeah, it's kind of fun to like look back through here and notice things that it really takes me back to like certain challenges and little fun things that were put in. Speaking of which, there's one thing I wanted to go back to in issue 3. So there's a panel that I remember in the script, John was like, Wheeljack turns to Starscream and makes like a smirk while he winks or something like that. And I'm like, how would he do that? He doesn't have a face. So like there's a panel where like Wheeljack's winking at Starscream, and it always kind of reminds me too of like the panel that John talks about with movie Megatron and how I made him look like he was you know, being sinister and what he was saying and stuff. So I don't know, that's the amazing challenge with Transformers. I think there was one too with like, was it Soundwave or somebody? John said, you know, he's got a certain expression on his face. I forget what it was, and I'm like, but Soundwave doesn't really have a face. How do I do that? But so those are the challenges of working with Transformers.
It's amazing how much emotion you guys can convey with just like the eyes and like the small little part of their face.
Yeah.
Oh, one other thing to point out too is like I don't know if people have noticed this, but there's a panel where RC's jumping down to take on the Constructicons, and it was very, very definitely like my little like Frank Miller moment. The way she's like jumping against negative space and like filling up the space with her laser sword, and yeah, so little things like that. I don't know, or fun little nods to things. And I remember too, like I think it was in the script where John's like she pulls out these big Rob Liefeld-esque like '90s guns. So that's why like she has these big ridiculous looking like '90s guns in the later on the issue, and then she's just like tossing them aside as she's blasting other Constructicons and things. So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I like RC's badassery is very well conveyed here, and I like how you know he's like Prowl's like, can you take on 5 Constructicons? And she's like, that's not even a challenge. And he's like, oh, make sure Blur doesn't see you. Like, oh, now it's a challenge.
And I just noticed something else too. You guys were talking about how he quote unquote killed the Constructicons off in this issue. And I remember we were very careful. Like if you look at the explosions, they're like their heads aren't exploding. They're like going off like at their neck. So it's not necessarily fatal. It's very like consciously drawn that way.
Yeah. Yeah, that is something I think everyone, like, when the reveal comes several months later, everyone goes back to this issue. It's like, oh yeah, they got us. Yeah.
And speaking of recurring background characters, I always enjoyed drawing Guzzle in the background of the control center. And I remember also like the command center or whatever, where you always see Bumblebee and Broadside and all those guys. But like I remember John referencing like Deep Space Nine a lot
Yeah.
when he talked about how that would work, that command center.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, Broadside's kind of he's always at the helm, basically, monitoring everything.
And I thought that was kind of funny because he's a big, strong wrecker, and he's just kind of like working a console, monitoring planes coming in, ships coming in.
He's an airplane and an aircraft carrier. Who would be better at landing airplanes? Like
True.
He knows both sides of it.
Was born to play.
Yep. And another wrinkle here, we get a little bit confused at RC's motivations as well, because we think she's just Prowl's enforcer, but here she kind of lets Dirge go for not clear reasons. It's like, well, she doesn't always do what she's told, or doesn't always do what she's expected to do, which I think is an interesting wrinkle to her character.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
It was fun to work with.
And you've got a cool. I mean, was this alt mode design also taken from Alex Milne too, Andrew, or was this your?
Which one for RC? No, that was based on some concept art I found online for War for Cybertron. I don't know if it was meant for like the DS game or something. I forget, but I think I sent it to you guys. There was some concept art I used for her. One thing I just noticed too is like when I was reading through this issue, there's a few times where it says it's for the greater good, and I just can't help but hear that from Hot Fuzz. If you guys remember Hot Fuzz, every time I read for the greater good, I just hear it. A bunch of like, I don't know, middle-aged pensioners in a small town in England saying for the greater good. Anyway.
Wow.
That's my little.
That might have been subconscious.
Yeah. And so also this issue divisive. So it's kind of intentionally misspelled. Is it the title of the issue? Do you remember what like, is this like, John, was this you devising something, or what is the what was the background for that? I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I do. The background is me spelling it wrong in the script, and then at one point, like as it was going to go to press, like I think catching it, and then Carlos being like, "No, I thought that." If that works, let's keep it. Yeah. I'm not the best speller.
Secrets revealed.
Yeah.
What's your position at IDW again?
They have machines that spell now. We don't need to do that.
Something else. I just noticed something else too. I remember like the scene where Bombshell takes over Prowl. Like, there's a reason like his hand is very specifically like stuck up, kind of aiming towards Prowl's face right as he's about to get shot. And if I remember right, that's when he's taking over him. That's when he's injecting him. If I remember correctly.
Yep.
And then after that, the dialogue stops. Like the next, like after one more panel there. And I like how that played out all the way through to when he died in Unicron. Spoiler alert, I know, sorry, but like even at the end there when he died, didn't you reference that whole thing?
Yeah. No, I mean that was he was always he was one of my favorite characters. Yeah, I remember what's his name, Skybite coming in. 'Cause I think in the pitch there was an idea of like following maybe it wasn't in the pitch, but at some point there's just an idea of following a nail, and then everybody or whatever, so a new arrival at least, and then all the Robots in Disguise fans, once they heard a series was called Robots in Disguise, wanting to know if Skybite was going to be in it. I'm like, who's Skybite? And I remember looking it up, and I'm like, he's a space shark poet. Like that's the best.
I have the DVD.
Nice.
He was one of those characters I always felt bad for Josh coloring too, because he's got so many different details on him and different colors and.
Yeah, I mean, look easy to color. I feel bad for you every time I've written like you're saying all this stuff, but like you were mentioning the scale thing, and like that was by far not into that. I mean, I remember writing scenes where Thundercracker's feeding baby carrots to Buster, and you're like, how do you draw that? And I'm like, well, okay, I guess they can be full-size carrots,
That makes a difference.
Yeah, and like all the crowd scenes, like all the times, like, and then there's 1,000 Transformers, behind you. Yeah.
I still remember on Dark Cybertron when I got the one page and it said there's billions of ammonites, whatever, fill the sky. And I remember writing Carlos. I'm like, is this a practical joke? Like is this really the script? Like I wasn't sure if they were just messing with me or something, but Alex is like, yeah, I got the same thing with the last page of my issue. So.
Well, I remember telling Alex on that one, like, he's like, a billion of them? I'm like, Alex, if you draw like 100,000 of them, nobody's going to know the difference.
So some of the crowd scenes in Robots in Disguise were nothing compared to that.
Well, at a certain point, it crosses a threshold where a billion's easier to draw than like 24. Like a billion is just little squiggles. 24 is like you actually have to draw 24 things.
Yeah. Speaking of like where inspiration comes from for some of the nails, and like the page where his ship starts to open up, and Skybite comes out. On the first panel, there's a nail in the background that's inspired by what are they called from the Dark Crystal? I can't remember the bird guys. I think. Yeah. So there's a nail in the background that's even kind of inspired by one of them.
You were really ahead of the curve.
Dude, that show, that original movie always stuck with me ever since I was a kid. Like I haven't even been able to watch the Netflix thing because it just stuck with me and creeped me out for like most of my life. But something about the animation just creeps me out. But it always like made a mark on me since I was a kid. But anyway. That's a diversion. Diversion spelled wrong, of course.
But yes, I mean Skybite here. He's and yeah, this is a character taken from the Robots in Disguise 2001 animated series, which that's I think Jeremy, that's definitely a soft spot in your heart. So yeah. I'm sure this issue was very delightful for you.
Yeah. Never had the Skybite.
Yeah, and it's interesting because Skybite, he's presented initially as just another nail, like another non-aligned Cybertronian coming home, but with his interaction with Ironhide, you realize no, he's actually a former Decepticon, which that makes sense. And then, of course, Skybite thinks Ironhide is ready to restart old enmities, but Ironhide's like, no, I'm a little bit more zen these days, so I'm if you're willing to make a fresh start, just go and do that. But of course, that leads to using Skybite as a little bit of a pawn to root out other Decepticons that they're looking for. Dirge is still in hiding, but other guys like Needlenose are still out there. So it's interesting that they do all this, but then this leads to because Prowl, of course, he wants to crack down on the Decepticons. Because we still think it's Prowl. We don't know that this is this is all part of a larger scheme. But Ironhide eventually comes to the realization that we're actually really mistreating the Decepticons, and we need to get rid of this whole inhibitor deterrence chip thing. Of course, those have already been deactivated, unbeknownst to everyone else. But he basically pushes the Bumblebee and the Autobots to finally let the Decepticons become more functioning members of the society, which I think it's a nice way to end this little 5-issue story arc, because you get Ironhide Ironhide being kind of he bleeds red. He's an Autobot through and through, but even he sees the in this post-war situation the value of making the Decepticons full-fledged members of society. So I think that's interesting. Also, Blur gets disillusioned with the Autobots, so he doesn't want to work with them anymore. Particularly, he's upset with Prowl not checking up on him after he gets injured. Of course, Prowl is not Prowl at this point, so it's Also, Bumblebee doesn't check up on him either, so Bumblebee has no excuse. But Prowl is compromised. But then Blur gets led down this new path where we have the return of McAdam's old oil house. And Andrew, you did something really interesting with this with McAdam's here. You patterned this over another familiar drinking establishment.
Most definitely. Yeah. Like to me, it was always basically just bar from Cheers. And part of that I think came from two things. One was like Cheers is just my all-time favorite sitcom. Just always loved that show. And then also part of it was like Blur was like former race, not a race car driver, but like a former racer or whatever, former athlete. So to me, he was always like, Sam's character from Cheers, like with the towel. I think I even draw him with like a towel over his shoulder at some point. But and then you can even see like what was the name of the waitress? I'm blank on everything tonight.
Diane.
No. The Carla.
Carla.
You can see the transformer version of her walking around carrying drinks. You can see Norman Cliff at the end of the bar there. But yeah, very much so. The layout and everything was very inspired by. I'll say inspired by Cheers.
There's that, and the second to last page. There's that like kind of insect-like guy back from page 2 of issue 1. He's crawling around. Right, like the guy that's kind of like rude.
Yeah.
There's one thing that we should really point out in this issue too that we didn't mention yet was Casey Collar very kindly stepped in and helped out with a few pages. So that we should give him proper credit.
Yeah, I was gonna make some sort of joke about it, but it's also what was actually funny is like I don't just flipping through it, like I can tell those pages so well, so easily. You know what I mean? I didn't remember him. Like I mean, I love Casey and I love his art, but it's like it's funny. It's like, oh yeah, those are he was doing. Yeah, they don't look quite the same. But yeah, he was the first other artist to come onto the book. You've been doing covers.
Ironhide is punching one guy, right?
What's that?
He did the page where Ironhide's punching one dude.
Yeah, the Decepticons get arrested and they're bringing them out. Yeah. And that last page and everything. Yeah. All few pages.
Casey went on to do that Ironhide miniseries, or maybe he did it before.
He did.
But,
that was
before.
Yeah, and they and his Ironhide, design for his head is just that's iconic. So.
Yeah, very distinctive.
Yeah.
This is. What was the other thing I was going to point out? Oh, one thing I thought was very interesting, like with John's writing in this is like in the beginning, like I guess it's right after Skybite shows up and Prowl and RC are talking. I think it's kind of interesting that like RC's a psycho killer, unpredictable, like dangerous wild card, and like she's basically like Pinocchio on Prowl's shoulder, like his conscience, and like that's how like bad Prowl is, in a way that like she's his conscience. You know what I mean? She's like, I'll do certain things, but I won't do this for you, and but I just think that's interesting.
Yeah. And we also get when Skybite is composing his poem, he grabs one of the sweeps, the head of one of the sweeps, like a last poor Yorick moment there.
Yeah, I don't remember who gets credit for it. I don't remember if that was in the script or if that was just something I did since they were around. I do remember the dead sweeps were around, but I don't remember if that was in the script or not.
Oh, well, whoever Andrew, I'll just give you credit since you drew the art. So I like that. That's great.
I do remember when Ironhide and Blur are looking outside of like what becomes McAdams, I guess. You do see a one or two Junkions walking past, and I remember at the time thinking, well, you know what? If it turns out that story reason they can't be Junkions, they're just nails that happen to look like Junkions,
and they were.
Yeah. Speaking of like, giving Josh some credit too. Like I always love the effect of one of the first pages when all the nails got the regular characters like Hippotank and those guys are hanging out, and the fire and the lighting that Josh gets there. The atmosphere is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The coloring. This book was one where we could really notice how the coloring made a difference in the story and the atmosphere and everything. I think throughout the whole series, Josh Perez just does a great job of really making these characters come to life with the colors here.
Oh, and a little bit of good news I just noticed. When Prowl and Blur Ironhide and Blur are walking around, I can see that one double-headed guy I mentioned earlier, he did survive that explosion in issue 3, so he's there in the background again.
All right.
Doing fine. He's doing fine even today.
Yeah. Well, I noticed in the new continuity they're using the other one double-headed guy from the double-page spread. They're giving him a name and everything in the new continuity. So I was like, he survived continuities. That's amazing.
Survived Unicron.
Oh, Swindle. I'm just looking through these pages, but
all right, and then and we end the story arc with Ironhide basically telling all his friends, "Yeah, I know the future, and you're all dead." and yeah, so that's I think that's a good way to end this this volume here. It's a nice little. The story's resolved, but it's a nice little cliffhanger going forward. So.
And I even like it's all dead.
Yeah.
It's a nice callback to the Marvel #5.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
And we should also point out that Prowl yet again has his antagonism with furniture of a table or desk variety, snapping off the end of the table.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now I'm curious so you guys were, as you were working on this, when you saw the response that fans like, what do you remember of fans talking about these issues as they were coming out? What did you think, like, and did you feel like you were encouraged, or did you feel like people were excited, and was that exciting for you?
Yeah. I remember when issue 1 came out, I was at like some sort of a Hasbro event in LA, I think. It was like a licensing thing. And I remember like checking my phone, to see what people were saying. on Twitter or whatever. So yeah, no, it was really encouraging. It was really nice. Like because like I don't know, I felt like being in the movie comics. It was really nice when people liked what we were doing, and there were a few places that did, and it was really cool to hear it. But a lot of people weren't. A lot of like the Transformers fans were more dismissive of those comics, or I mean, not unreasonably, I guess. But yeah, it was. I was nervous. I didn't know how things were going to happen or things were going to go. It was generally, I thought it was really cool. I was happy to see how well all the stuff was received. Yeah.
I remember at the time this issue was wrapping up. I was thinking, wow, we're going to have this like a bar in here. In this book is going to be a recurring thing. That's something more than BTI isn't going to have. So, but anyway, no, like I remember, yeah, it was nice to listen to the podcast and read the reviews and things, and like I'm always kind of really sensitive and kind of wincing when I'm checking that stuff out. But then it's nice when like, oh, it's positive, and we're getting on like the buy pile at CBR and everything, or whatever, comic book resources and like mainstream comic book sites, not just Transformers sites, but people are like recommending the book and everything. So that was really amazing to see.
All right. Well, we've gone a lot longer than I originally intended, but it's been a really great discussion, and I think this first story arc was really came together and really had me excited about the Transformers comics again. So I was, as I was reading this, I was buying them month to month, and I was right in there. I was listening to the Underbase and listening to their reviews every month, and yeah, it was really great. So also, I mean, these are still out. These comics are still out there. I mean, I would say you can pick these if you want them digitally. You can get them directly from IDW Publishing, I think, and on Comixology. So either one of those. There's also, periodically there will be IDW Humble bundles that will come up with a boatload of Transformers comics. So that might be coming up. That happens fairly yearly, occasionally. I'm not gonna promise anything since John, maybe you can. I don't know if you can.
Yeah, it's not a hint.
Anything, but yeah. but yeah, I mean they've been happening almost yearly, and so you can you might be able to get all these comics at once. But yeah, I mean, I definitely, if you have never checked out Robots in Disguise and the sister series More Than Meets the Eye, definitely check them out. They're also part of the IDW Phase 2 collections that are available. You can get those both in trade paperback and digitally. So that's our plug for for going through and doing this episode. So and John and Andrew, thanks so much for joining us on this. And we're going to do some more. So we're going to, this was just the first volume. So there's a lot more Robots in Disguise to talk about. So we'll continue on. And I got to thank Andrew for really coming up with this. This was Andrew's idea, and he reached out to us to get this going. So Andrew, thanks for reaching out to us and wanting to do this.
Yeah, sure. It's fun to take a look back, and like one of the things that inspired this was I've had fans on Twitter and different places still coming around now and then, like asking questions about the series. So people seem to still have interest in it. And if they want a little more meat on the bone, I just remembered in the original trade paperback, there's an interview in the back of it with John and myself and Josh, and I was just looking through it a little bit, and it's stuff I didn't even remember. Like apparently it was my idea to use barrel roll. I don't remember that at all, but John credits me for making it barrel roll instead of just a generic. But anyway, so yeah, there's more stuff there. If you have the original trade and are interested in this kind of thing, there's more information like that in the back.
Oh, yeah. Well, I hope this doesn't contradict all the stuff we just said.
That's okay. You can retcon it later. You'll find a way to make it make sense.
Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah. Thanks, Andrew Griffith. Thanks, John Barber, for joining us. Check out all the Transformers comics at idwpublishing.com. You can check out all the current Transformers comics. There's the new continuity going on. There's great crossovers. Transformers versus Terminator is really cool. Transformers and versus My Little Pony, that's coming up soon. We've got the Transformers 84 series that's by Simon Furman and Guido Guidi and our friend John Paul Bove. That's another series that's going on right now, and yeah, lots of good stuff.
Don't forget the Back to the Future.
Oh yeah, the Transformers Back to the Future crossover coming in October. So yeah, check that out as well.
And Galaxies, don't forget.
Oh yeah, Transformers Galaxies. Yes, there's lots of good Transformers stuff.
Featuring Andrew.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the Ultra Magnus storyline. You drew all 3 parts of that, didn't you, Andrew?
Well, I'm currently drawing them. Yes. So I'm about halfway through that story arc right at the moment.
Yeah, and that's with writer Brandon Easton. So also
who's on the
really exactly. Yep. So yeah, lots of good stuff. And for more Transmissions, Transformers podcast, you can check us out at transmissionspodcast.com. These special series are going up early exclusively for our Donatrons. So if you'd like to become one of those, you can go to transmissionspodcast.com/support, and that's where you can sign up either on Patreon or PayPal to support us, and you'll get all these special series early before everyone else gets them. You can basically get in on the ground floor. So thanks everyone for watching and listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Sure.
Take care. See ya.
Later.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to this episode of Transmissions. But just because this episode is over doesn't mean the Transformers fun has to stop. Join us and other Transformers fans on our Discord chat server by visiting transmissionspodcast.com/discord. If you would like to learn more about how you could support the Transmissions podcast, just visit transmissionspodcast.com/support. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you again next week.